It's a great pleasure to share this afternoon with you in this forum and with this distinguished audience. I want to apologize because I prepared my paper in Spanish, so I will try to translate it into English. I want to ask you, how many of you can raise your hand, know anything about what is the Spanish transition? Do you ever hear of the Spanish transition? Yes, yes. Raise your hand, Andrego. Yes? Oh, okay, thank you. Okay, so most of you know that the Spanish transition is something about political regime from an authoritarian regime to a democratic system. So, in my foundation, which is the Spanish Transition Foundation, we defend and divulge, we spread the principles of the Spanish transition. And what are these principles of the Spanish transition? Well, we think they are the dialogue. In the transition, we used to say that dialogue was for national reconciliation. Spain, fortunately, is already reconciliate, but we still think that we need dialogue. Democratic generosity and constitutional loyalty. For those who are not familiarized with the Spanish history, today's Spanish regime is rather new. I mean, it has only 37 years. And it is not something that we use, it was not in the common history of Spain. Every time we had a political crisis, the best way to solve it was through a civil war. We had 4 in the last 200 years. And one of the good things of this transition is that it was done without any war. What happened in the 70s? Well, we started from the end of an authoritarian regime, and in 1975 this process started, and it was developed in a very short period of time. In 8 months that the Spanish dictator died, 8 months later there was the first amnesty law. 12 months later, the parliament approved the law for the reform, for the political reform. 18 months later, the political parties were legalized. 17 months later, censorship was forbidden anymore. There were no anymore censorship, and there was the right of trade unions. I mean, trade unions were allowed to be in Spain. 19 months later, free elections were held, and 2 years later, a constitution was approved. So it was a rather fast moment. Nevertheless, there are 3 main milestones of the Spanish transition. The amnesty laws, the Moncloa agreements, and the constitution itself. So I'm going to talk to you today about the Moncloa agreements. What are the Moncloa agreements? Well, these are at the beginning of the 70s, Spain, the economic system of Spain was flourishing because some of economic measures taken in 1959. But the oil crisis of 1973 arrived to Spain a few years later, and the main focus of the Spanish people was in the political agenda, not in the economic agenda. So what happened? In 1977, the economic situation was too bad not to do anything. So there was this Spanish prime minister who had a new government, and he he appointed an economic minister who said that we couldn't go this way. I mean, there were three main problems at the time. One, that in the central bank there were not any more foreign currency, so Spain couldn't buy any foreign product. We couldn't buy oil or whatever other product. So that was one of the first and main problems. There was the balance of payments. Then the inflation was 2 digits, 30%, and we were losing competitiveness. Measures had to be taken, and we had to adjust the economic structure in the field of monetary policy to contain inflation and to balance the balance of payments. As a result of many years of interventionism, Spain had a very rigid economical system. The companies couldn't fire the workers, and the workers at the same time couldn't get into strike. So it was like a quid pro quo. So this economic minister, he decided to start an economic plan, and he went to the national TV and talked to the people in a way no one had talked to the Spaniards before, like real citizens. And he said that he was going to talk about an irritating issue, which is a crisis, of course. And he said that if we don't resolve these irritating issues, they get bigger and bigger, and no one could resolve them. He said a very important thing, one of the main things of this, he said that to solve the economic problems, economic problems are solved by political measures. And he talked in a very simple way so people could understand what he said. He proposed an urgent program of measures, liberalizing the finance system. He announced reform in the fiscal system. And just with these first measures, the politics of the time were thinking that it was enough, because what those politics of the Spanish transition wanted was to spend money, because they were trying to get into a democratic system, and they wanted to spend to raise salaries, make highways, make new schools, and so on. And this economic minister said, no way, if you're going to do that, don't count with me. So from that moment, the Prime Minister decided to follow this program. And they were thinking of doing it in a short way or in a more gradual way. The short way was a hard plan, 12 months, or a more gradual way, 2 years. They decided this second way. But how they arrived to this program, and how do you arrive to these agreements? Well, the people at the time knew that they couldn't solve the problems alone, so they had to count on the opposition to resolve this crisis. And this is very important. So the first meetings with the opposition and the social actors, they agreed in three main issues. They agreed in the diagnosis. They agreed that the cost for overcome the crisis were to be supported in an equivalent way by all the different social groups. And they agreed as well in applying monetary and financial measures in 2 years' time. So the first economic measures were in the budget. They reduced the public spending, and they oriented the public a part of the spending in the employment. They reduced the cost of the social security that the companies have to pay for each worker. They moderate the printing of bills, so to reduce inflation. They restrain the rise in salaries, and they adopt measures to assure a more effective insurance of unemployment. And there were also political agreements linked to this economic agreement. So many measures in the educational system were adopted, as well as in the urban and housing system to help people to have houses. They tried to reform the social security system, so they have a more effective one. They did a more effective family plan, helping plan, and they promote a more efficient unemployment insurance system. But there were also some political agreements. For instance, liberty of expression started at that point. The opposition started to, were invited to be a part of the committee in the state television, and the right of reunion was established, as well as the right of political association. Adultery, living with someone else without being married, and regulation of contraceptives would not anymore a crime. People who were arrested had, from the first moment, a lawyer. That's something we are used now, but it's rather new now. It's rather new in Spain. The code of military justice, for instance, they changed it so it was applied only to militaries, because before that, civil people could be charged in the code of military justice. And the police were to be in ordinary tribunals. So what were the results of these Moncloa agreements? Well, it was rather a success in the economic point of view, and it was very important because otherwise the other milestones I talked before would not be possible. as a Spanish politician of the 19th century said that politics is the art of applying a part of the ideal that the time makes possible. I think that people at the time knew that the measures were very difficult, but the result would solve the economic situation. Thank you so much.